Good morning, everybody, and it's great to see so many of you on the call today. I know it's been a really busy morning with a number of companies reporting today, so thank you very much for your time and for making yourselves available. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to see our presentation that we went out with at 7 a.m. this morning, and I'm sure that there are a number of questions. So with that, I'll hand over to Chris to kick us off.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We will get straight into it as usual. Pop your hand up if you'd like to ask a question. We will start with James. You look like you're in first in the queue, mate. Go ahead.
Good morning. Well done on the results. Just had, I guess my main question is on the outperformance target over the base allowed return. I was wondering whether you could firstly just clarify, is that based on the Ofwat leverage assumption? And then if you can give us any details in terms of what's making up that 1% or more outperformance, that'd be really useful. Thank you.
Great, thanks James, and morning. Yeah, so look, I'm really pleased that this morning we've been able to provide that guidance. We've deliberately set that out so that we've got a high degree of confidence that we can ensure that we deliver through the AMP. We're guiding to at least 100 basis points outperformance, and the main driver of that is financing outperformance, as well as contributions that are coming from ODIs and PCDs and TOTEX. So we've set that to ensure that we can deliver as we go through the AMP period. Phil?
Yeah, and James, your first question about the leverage assumption, yes, it is on the Ofwat 55% leverage assumption.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, James. Very efficient. Jenny, your turn.
Thanks very much. Two questions, please. Just firstly, on the ODI penalties that you talk about for the current year we're in, can you provide a bit of magnitude in terms of the size that we're talking about in terms of that penalty? And then secondly, back to James's question on the at least 100 basis points. I understand the difference between the notional structure of what you're guiding versus your actual financial structure outturn. But when you look at your RoRE composition in terms of what you've achieved in the past, you've done a lot better, especially on financing with regards to the 100 basis points. So can you just give us a sense of, and I also note you say, the 100 basis point comes with a high degree of confidence. Can you give us a sense of the level of conservatism that you have here? And presumably, the vast majority of that is going to come from the financing part again, or could it now this time be real turnaround on TOTEX and ODIs? Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. So look, I'll pick up the first question and then I'll hand over to Phil. So in relation to ODIs for next year, we're not guiding to a specific number. We've set the guidance at 100 basis points and provided clarity on where that contribution is coming from. Obviously, the ODIs build as we go through the AMP period in the context of delivering both the capital programme and the contribution that comes as a result of delivering that infrastructure and the improvements that we expect to see in terms of outcome delivery incentives and in terms of PCDs. So that gets more progressive as we go through the AMP period. Phil?
Yeah, just on the financing, Jenny, as you know, we perform very well on financing and have done historically, and expect to continue to do so going forward. I probably will take the opportunity at the Capital Markets Day to get into a lot more detail around the financing position. But suffice to say for today, as we said in the RNS announcement, the outperformance is very much underpinned by financing outperformance, and the main part of it is from financing, but we haven't given any greater granularity.
Thank you.
Okay, Pav.
Thanks, Chris, and morning, everyone. I have three questions, please. Firstly, on the 100 basis points, a clarifying question as well on assumptions. Does that 100 basis points, so I appreciate it's on 55% notional gearing, does it assume any impact or any benefit from inflation at the start of the AMP or expectations for this year being stickier than expected, or is that a real 100 basis points number, particularly as it relates to the financing outperformance? Second question on ODIs. The penalty for FY26, I appreciate you're not giving a magnitude, but can you give a bit more color, I guess, as to where it's coming from? Is it a couple metrics like sewer flooding or CSOs, or is it a bit more broad-based? And can you say anything today that will give us confidence that will turn around to get you to a net reward position on average over the AMP or by the end of the AMP? And then my last question, going through your results, it looks like there was a change in how I think about the RORI definition. Phil, can you give a bit more color on that? And I guess the key question on that is there any economic impact on the change in RORI definition, or is it just a move in the buckets between what's in real RORI and what counts as inflation, and how that ties in with tax outperformance? I'd appreciate any color on that, please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pav. So look, I think there's three questions there, as you've said, so we'll break them down. I'll take your second one first, and then I'm going to hand over to Phil. So in relation to FY26, you're absolutely right. It's a couple of ODI measures where sewer flooding, etc., CSOs, where we're making really strong progress, but we expect progressively as we move through the AMP, we will see those benefits. We are clear we do expect to be in a net reward position over the AMP period, and we've been clear that we see both ODIs and PCDs contributing to that outperformance. We're just not guiding to an overall amount at this moment in time, but they're all contributory factors. And as we go through the AMP, we start to see that improvement build through. With Phil, I'll hand over on both the point around inflation assumptions and RORI and tax specifically.
Morning, Pav. I was smiling at the reference to a real 100 basis points outperformance, so just to re-emphasise, it is at least 100 basis points of outperformance that we're guiding to today. Clearly you're right, the inflation assumptions really matter, so great question. We've assumed CPI of 2% in our forward forecast effectively, so we've used Bank of England bank technical forecasts in the short term, reverting to the 2% long-term forecast, effectively sort of 2 years out. So from that perspective, to the extent that some of the banks are forecasting slightly higher CPI in the near term, that is factored into those assumptions. But the sort of last 3 years, it's 2% effectively. And then your sort of question about the RORI definition, on the 31st of March, Ofwat put out what they call a regulatory accounting guideline. So these are the sort of documents that set out how you do your regulatory reporting for the year. So a very, very late change. You're right, it's not an economic impact, it's just a presentational one. It doesn't change any cash flows in the context of a PR24 determination. And what the change was basically there was an amount of carried forward value on the tax adjustment. So we've got sort of 20 or 30 different ex post adjustment mechanisms that go into the process for a price review process. One of those is in relation to tax, and that wasn't factored into the RORI calculation under the previous definitions. And what they've asked is for that get factored in now. So that's the change that's happened. So it will impact all companies because they've had to issue an update to the regulatory accounting guidelines to sort of ask people to report in a different way. But it doesn't change the overall carry forward value that went into the price control and the cash flows. So there's no economic impact from that.
Thank you. Very clear.
Thanks, Pav.
Excellent. Thank you, Pavan, for that detailed question on accounting or regulation. John was about to go next, but he just stood up, so he lost his spot. Now he's back just in the nick of time. Go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, 2 questions from me, please. Firstly, how worried are you about the dry weather, particularly in the northwest? Sorry, my dog's kicking off in the background. You can hear some barking. How worried are you about the dry weather, and what impact will that have potentially on your ODIs? Obviously, you do really well on CSOs, but less well elsewhere. And do you think we're going to see some TOTEX costs come through? And secondly, on your ODIs outperformance, what sort of assumptions have you put in for OAMs and where you stand relative to your peers? And where I'm coming on this one here is I always led to believe that you're one of the best sector performers out there. And if you're only going to be getting 100 bits of outperformance you get 100 bits of outperformance and limited from ODIs, Why did you not appeal? Go to the CMA and appeal. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'll take both of those questions. So in relation to dry weather, yes, we've seen a dry start to the year. We're going to see how things progress. But look, we are prepared for those outcomes. We've been planning well in advance. We have plans to deal with those eventualities. I think it's worth remembering that up here in the north, we are reservoir fed. So essentially, although we drain quite quickly, we fill very, very quickly too. So it's a very different position than in the south. But we've been preparing for those eventualities. We've been moving water around the system, and we've invested quite heavily in ensuring that the system is actually connected. So we have the ability to move water around the northwest, and we're doing that accordingly. We have all the teams sort of stood up and doing the activities that you'd expect us to do. So well prepared and planned for that. I suppose, on a positive note, I am quite reassured in that Phil's going walking in the Lake District over half term, and actually having looked at the weather forecast, it looks like it's essentially going to, the skies are going to open. So we all can't wait for that. But we're planning as you'd expect us to do, and doing everything that is in accordance with our planning. In relation to ODIs, the guidance that we've set this morning, we've been very clear that it is at least 100 basis points in terms of on top of the base return. We are very clear that we're working through. We expect that we will be seeing positive returns from both ODIs and PCDs as we move forward. You asked the question, why didn't we appeal? I think we've been very clear around accepting the determination. We look at it in the round, the opportunities in terms of delivering returns, both in terms of financing outperformance and rewards that are on the table, but also the fact that we were able to negotiate some company-specific targets on a couple of the things that are an issue to us in the northwest, particularly on combined sewer overflows and sewer flooding. So it's important that we look at those things in the round in terms of accepting the FD.
Sorry, because come back on the OAM part of it, though, that if the 5 or 6 who have appealed get a much better ODI outcome, will you go back to Ofwat and ask for a readjustment of your numbers?
Look, so I think there's a lot of time to travel yet in terms of where that ultimately lands, essentially, and what those outcomes are of the CMA. We're all watching that avidly, as you'd expect, and the answer is yes. We will be having conversations as those sort of outcomes are known in relation to the CMA. But yes, we would absolutely be going back if there were any amendments that were made accordingly.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Dom. Julius, go ahead.
Great. Thank you for taking my questions. Just 2 left for me. First of all, can you confirm that you expect also TOTEX to contribute to the 100 bips or at least 100 bips outperformance? And maybe on TOTEX, could you clarify the level of underperformance that we've seen this year? How much of that is due to the additional investments that you pulled forward? And then just quickly, I would be interested to hear your take on the CMA response to the call of evidence that would, and just to hear what your take is on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. So I think there's in a couple of parts. I'll talk about TOTEX in terms of AMP8, and then Phil can sort of talk a little bit about looking back too, and then pick up on CMA. So yes, of course, we expect to see TOTEX outperformance as we go forward. We are focusing extremely heavily in terms of utilisation of technology, AI, how we ensure that our overall delivery is, smarter, much more efficient than it is today. You'll have hopefully heard me talk on the video this morning. We've got a Capital Markets Day on the 19th of June. We're providing a lot more colour about actually how we will be delivering AMP8, how we expect to deliver those efficiencies. So an opportunity there to do a little bit more of a deep dive in terms of how we expect some of that TOTEX efficiency to come through. Phil, do you want to pick up in relation to TOTEX for this year?
Yeah, in terms of the sort of overall sort of RORE position for this year, I think there's a couple of things going on here. So back in FY22, there was a large amount of investment that was announced effectively. That investment fed into sort of years 3, 4 and 5, but predominantly years 4 and 5. So what you're observing in the TOTEX numbers is some of the drag from that in years 4 and 5. as the work, because this takes quite a while to sort of feed through the supply chain and out and to be implemented. And then obviously the other big driver of Rory is the financing performance, and the financing performance was very significant in years 3 and 4. So what you've effectively had in year 4 is a bit of an offset between financing and that TOTEX, whereas in year 5 the financing has reverted to more steady state normal levels, and the TOTEX is feeding through from that investment. So I think we touched on it in the announcement a little bit and in the script of the slides, but that's the main driver and the main reason.
I think you had an additional question in relation to CMA, which is essentially, you know, the call for evidence and the response. I mean, obviously there's a lot of activity going on backwards and forwards. Probably not appropriate for me to sort of comment on that. But obviously we are watching the process, and we'll be having the relevant conversations at the appropriate time, as you'd expect us to.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, going to have Mark Freshney, and then we'll go to Sarah straight after that. I can see you're holding up your hand, Sarah. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, hello. Thank you for taking my questions. I have 2. Firstly, Phil, the change in infrastructure renewals, you know, allocation between P&L and fixed assets or balance sheet, does that impact in any way the credit ratios that are used by the rating agencies for that? And just secondly, on ODIs and the 100 bips target for Rory outperformance, I mean, ODIs is one of the moving parts within that, a fairly big one. How can you actually guide for ODIs given that you don't know what Ofwat's going to do with the anchoring or the OAM mechanism, I think they call it? Because clearly there are quite a range of outcomes, whether they apply what the CMA say to the whole industry, or whether just they apply it to the non-appellants, or you know, because in a way you're taking a call on other companies. So I'm just trying to understand how you can take a call on the 100 bips, or is it that you can get 100 bips without ODIs, and it will be good to understand that specific question.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Phil, do you want to pick those up?
Yeah, okay. Hi, Mark. So the IRE change, as you say, effectively operating cash flows will be seen to improve, and capital cash flows will sort of reduce effectively. So that's the nature of the change. So it won't change debt to RCV or any metrics like that. So they will continue to be the same position. So a neutral position there, but operating metrics will be improving effectively as a consequence of that. And effectively the change will take us back more to where we were in an old UK GAAP perspective from the accounting. So effectively the agencies are very well versed in understanding infrastructure renewals accounting and the impacts of it. So we've got the opportunity going forward because of our systems and processes to take a more granular approach, and that's what we're intending to do starting in FY26.
And so, sorry to chip in, Phil, what extra balance sheet capacity do you think it might give you, except that it only impacts operating ratios, but what extra debt capacity will this accounting change and credit ratio change give you, if any?
So it won't change debt to RCV as a metric. So economically, that's obviously the key metric that most people focus on. So that won't change. Things like interest cover FFO ratios will improve. I'm not seeing it sort of changing really the overall capacity of a balance sheet from that perspective. I'm just seeing it as being a more sensible way of getting the accounting to reflect what's really happening in terms of the underlying asset base. So then your second question, Mark, was on Rory, wasn't it? And 100 basis points and the ODIs effectively.
Just how can you make the 100 bips given the ODIs? We just don't know what the CMA conclusion is for OAM.
So clearly there's lots of things we sit here today and don't know about and we have to take a view on. in the context of our position, as we've said, at least 100 basis points, there's a good underpin there in the context of financing performance. And then there's contributions from ODIs, PCDs, and sort of TOTEX. From that perspective, we'll refine our estimates as we go forward. And it's, I guess, at the start of the AMP, we've got a long way to go from this point forward, really.
Okay, great. Thank you for those, Mark. Sarah, over to you. Apologies about the technical hitch.
That's right. No, I apologise. And I apologise, secondly, because I'm going to bury a little bit further down this OAM rabbit hole. But I just want to tie a bow on it, please, and just clarify two things. So is it your understanding that ultimately we could end up with 2 peer groups for the OAM? And then secondly, from your unique conversations and perspective, does Ofwat and the CMA understand that there's clearly inherent bias in those peer groups if they are separated? Or is it just wait and see? Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll tie a bow on
No,
it.
it's fine. It's fine. So look, in the interest of trying to tie a bow on it, Sarah, and I'm probably going to give what sounds like a bit of a politician's answer, to be honest, which is, well, look, we don't know. So we don't know which way that's going to go. It's still got some way to run. And I think, we are having conversations as indeed are those companies that are going through the process. So I think, well, look, we're just going to have to wait and see how that materialises. I think there are some things that are more clear, such as PCDs and things like that, where they're not, the same mechanisms are not applied. But we're just going to have to wait and see how that process runs. So I don't feel like I've been able to put a bow on it so much for you, Sarah, as perhaps put a little bit of an elastic band, which is a little bit of we're going to have to wait and see how the process runs through.
Totally understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bartek, over to you.
Thank you very much and good morning. A couple of things from my side. Just to test how better the current regulatory framework is, if we look at your TOTEX underperformance in AMP7, which was minus 2.2%, and we sort of apply, if you theoretically apply today's regulatory framework to AMP7, where do you think this TOTEX performance would go? I mean, would it come out of underperformance? Do you think it would completely disappear? Or do you think there will be still some risks of running TOTEX underperformance? I know you are much better protected right now. Second thing, if we look at your bad debt charges, you show the chart that you have gone down to 1.5%. Of course, you are facing a significant tariff increase in the water sector in the UK. So I just wonder how well in AMP8 Ofwat is protecting you from a potential increase in bad debt charges, and actually what level of bad debt charges is assumed in the final determination. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Bartek. Do you want to take TOTEX and I'll cover off bad debt, Phil?
Yeah, morning, Bartek. So taking the TOTEX first, I think there's probably 3 factors that feed into all of this. So firstly, there was an amount of work that was announced back in FY22 that was incremental to the FD and unfunded. And that is something that won't be being repeated as we go forward in the context of AMP8. So that's quite a big different position. Clearly, the second thing that happened going through AMP7 was a very significant spike in inflation and the challenges around all of that as well. And I don't think any of us are predicting that to be happening going forward into the AMP8 position. And then lastly, the AMP8 position, we benefit significantly from having a much larger TOTEX programme. So, the ability to programme the work and programmatically manage that activity creates more opportunity with that larger programme than we had with a very small programme in AMP7. So all of those things together give us a lot more confidence around AMP8 performance on TOTEX.
And in relation to your question that you asked on bad debt, the way that it is sort of covered within the mechanism is it aligns or it integrates into the retail cost to serve. And what you can see, I think, on the graph that we showed this morning is that our bad debt charge as a percentage has been significantly reduced over both this AMP and the previous AMP. So the way that it reflects through is as an allowance from a percentage of revenue. We feel we're well placed because we've continued to see improvements on that bad debt performance, both in terms of the processes that we have in place in terms of managing credit, but also the benefits that we've put in place in relation to affordability support. So we're now able to help 1 in 6 customers, £525 million worth of additional support that is there. So we feel that we're well placed. And actually our early signs, having gone through that sort of first billing period with the new bill increases, is that credit collections have held up exceptionally well, which is really pleasing to see. And I think that's a reflection of the investment that we've made both in technology and process and capability, but also the additional affordability support that's on the table too. At the same time, we're actively working with government because there is great progress being made on a national social tariff, which UU would be a beneficiary of. So again, we see that as an opportunity as we go through the AMP.
May I just rephrase question 1? So because you mentioned those 3 factors impacting your TOTEX underperformance. So now, if we were to apply today's regulatory framework to AMP7, do you think the second factor, this macro impact, will be absolutely eliminated, or do you think there will be still some? I mean, I guess there is much more protection right now, but I just wonder if this is now, we're talking about full protection, so this TOTEX underperformance coming from inflation, material cost increases will completely disappear, or still not? How do you see theoretically?
It's probably quite there's definitely sort of better protections with things like the power mechanism for sort of costs, etc. in AMP8 than there was in AMP7, but clearly there still remains a lot of residual risk in the programmes more generally, and Ofwat has the cost sharing mechanisms in place to support that. So I don't see it making AMP8 TOTEX delivery risk-free, if that's the question. I think the risks are still there. Clearly, we're in a very strong position going into that for 3 factors that I called out, and that's what I see being different from AMP7 stepping into AMP8.
I think just to add to what Phil said, I think what we have seen is a change from Ofwat in terms of that cost-sharing mechanism, particularly in terms of enhancement expenditure, in terms of 60/40. And again, I think that gives us additional protection. But I think what you're going to see when you hopefully can make it to the Capital Markets Day is what we've been doing in terms of making sure that we're driving standardised solutions design. We're making sure that we are focused on delivering within the TOTEX envelope that we have, and the new capability that we brought in the team to make sure that we can do that at scale. So we'll provide a little bit more colour to that on the Capital Markets Day on the 19th of June too.
Thank you.
Terrific. Last but not least, Tom, you've got a follow-up.
Yes, can't be last, surely. 2 questions for me, please. Can I ask a question about the Water Framework Directive, which clearly sets the investment, the permitting, the licences, and as I understand it, the one that we adopted from the EU expires in 2027, and it's fairly inflexible. 2027 is not far away, so could you sort of give us some colour as to what you expect it to be replaced with, and what sort of constraints and or sort of opportunities it could provide to you, particularly in more discretion for regulation, which I think was kind of discussed by DEFRA and maybe the Urban Wastewater Directive. And sort of leading on from that, one of the areas that I think is increasingly debated is, do the water companies and particularly yourselves, are you in full control, and is the regulator fully understand the state of your asset health, and whether or not this is the capital maintenance requirements are needing to probably ramp up again as focus sort of shifts to that, please? Thank you.
Right, okay, thanks, Dom. So, look, in terms of the WFD and 2027, I think you'll find that this is going to be covered as part of Sir John Cunliffe's review. I think you're right, it's a couple of years ago. We're expecting Sir John's recommendations at the end of May, with his final recommendations landing just before recess. And I think both the sort of WFD framework and also those broader enhancement frameworks, I think will be covered within that, both in terms of sort of the WINEP objectives and water resource management plans and drainage management plans as well. So I think there has been a huge amount of focus within DEFRA about the WFD in 2027 and therefore what will potentially need to adjust and change, because you're right, that's not far away. So I think we haven't probably got long to wait until we get some clarity on that specific position. In relation to asset health, I think it was very clear. We made quite a lot of representations through our price review process, but I think both in terms of what Ofwat have said and have put into this AMP8 period as an area of focus that they're going to be looking at as we go through. And I think they've even talked about the word reopener is a word that they've used, is around asset health. And again, I think there will be a lot of recommendations in Sir John's outcome, which is about the understanding of asset health, the need for a consistent standard across the UK, and to your point, Dom, investment in those base assets. Now, what I'd say from a UU perspective is we've got quite a mature asset health framework in terms of the work that we have been doing, and we've been feeding that in. But I think there is a recognition with whoever you speak to, whether that's government, regulators or companies, is that there needs to be a much greater level of investment in base asset health, not just enhancement expenditure too. So I think that's going to be a core feature of AMP9, and I suppose some of the early indications are that may not just wait till AMP9. That's probably something that we need to be getting going on now, certainly in terms of that assessment piece. But I think it's going to form a key part of Sir John's recommendations that, like I say, we expect at the end of May.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Lou and Phil, I'll pass back to you.
Brilliant. Well, look, thanks, Chris. I suppose, like I said at the beginning, I know it's a really busy time, so really appreciate that you're coming on online this morning. So, look, I suppose just to sum up some key points, really, that I made this morning. We are a top quartile performer. We've got a really strong track record. Financially, we're in a really strong position, with gearing at midpoint of our range, and more importantly, we're fully equity funded as we go into AMP8. And lastly, we think our returns guidance, as well as the growth we're expecting to see over the next 5 years and beyond, provides that sort of picture and clarity that you've been looking for. We hope to see you on the 19th of June so that we can provide more detail and more colour about how we're going to deliver this plan. And I suppose lastly, just a bit of a thank you to the team here at UU. It's great to be leading such a committed team, great levels of engagement and commitment, and everybody's focused on delivering the outcomes that everybody wants to see. So thank you for joining us this morning. I look forward to seeing those of you I'm meeting over the next couple of days, and we look forward to seeing you on the 19th of June. Thank you.